What is going on, y'all? VNNCC3 here, and I'm so glad you stopped by. That's right, you Malakis. No one but you. To spend some of your quality time to hang out with me today because we are going to be going over how to discover what your best march is, right? Whether it's an infantry wedge, a cavalry phalanx, yada yada yada, okay? So let's go ahead and get into this really quick here. A lot of guys are always going to ask, well, should I use this or should I use that? Well, what kind of stats do you have? And what I mean by stats are this line right here. It says leader deployed. Now, your leader has to be inside that march for you to get these stats. Now, people are like, what about monster hunting? You don't have to. We're not talking about monster hunting, okay, fam? We are talking specifically about marches, okay? So leader deployed, it means your leader has to physically be inside that march to get these green stats. And so for you guys that are like, well, is 2 types or 3 types better? Well, this is a perfect way to find out. I know that if you're heavily like, let's say, 400% cavalry attack, 400% infantry, and like 100% ranged, that's a no-brainer. You should use infantry and cavalry and then mix between those 2 troops, okay? So, on that note, though, how do you figure out what your best march is? Well, here's a simple explanation, okay? What you do is you get 2 guys, right? Whether it's Neural and Agent Cooper. What they do is they send out 1 camp somewhere, it doesn't really matter where it's at, and then what happens is 1 player, the person who is being the defender, sets 1 camp out of small troops, maybe it's 2,500 troops or less, right? And you don't want to take big losses, right? And so in this camp, it'll have a formation of, let's say, 1,000 infantry, 1,000 range, and like 500 cavalry. And so what they'll do, and by the way, that's without their leader, okay? Without their leader, because you guys aren't trying to cause too many losses to one another, okay? And so essentially what you're doing is the person who's defending will use an infantry phalanx first, and then they'll use a ranged phalanx, and then they'll use the cavalry phalanx, and then they'll turn around and they'll use a cavalry wedge, a ranged wedge, and then a ranged and an infantry wedge, okay? And so as far as the troop compositions go, like should you have like 1,000 cavalry or 1,000 range? Well, you could base that off of whatever you find inside of your guys' kingdom, meaning if you guys know for a fact everybody in your kingdom is heavy cavalry, heavy ranged, well, it's a no-brainer, bro. Send 1,000 cavalry, 1,000 range, and 500 infantry, okay? Or you can just split it between the 2 of them, or you can go 60-40, whichever way you decide you're going to do your test. But you absolutely need to make sure that the camp the player's defending with has the exact same heroes and troops inside of it every single time they send a camp out. The attacker, on the other hand, will decide, well, if I'm going to use a cavalry phalanx because I have really high cavalry stats, or maybe a cavalry wedge because I have high cavalry, high infantry, right? There's something just like this. Maybe their cavalry and infantry are really, really high statted, so they want to use a wedge instead. Well, if they're going to use the wedge, they got to decide, is a phalanx or a wedge going to be better in that situation, okay? And so how do you figure that out, right? Well, that was simple, right? You send the player with the camp. They defend, and each time they defend, they change their formation up. They do it 6 times. You do that 6 times for a wedge, and then you do it 6 times for a phalanx. And then you take your numbers and you say, okay, well, I did more damage here, but I lost more troops, but I did this much and this much, right? And you basically work your numbers out between each other. But you guys got to remember, no matter what, this camp right here has to be the exact same amount of troops and heroes, otherwise, and no buffs, by the way, right? You can't pop any buffs during the matter, because if anything changes, it's gonna throw your numbers all the way through the roof. It's gonna really, really mess you guys up. So, a couple of things you guys are gonna be wondering about is, well, what if my leader's sheltered? What if this, bro? We're not talking about if that. We specifically just said that if your leader is not deployed, you don't get these stats. That's why the attacker has to send their leader, guys. I'm trying to drill it in your head. The attacker has to send their leader every single time. And they have to send the exact same troops every single time. Like, basically what I'm saying here is that you set out the camps. You set the camps out, right? Set the camps out. And the person defending sends out whatever troop composition and whatever hero composition. But they stick to it. Then they do 6. Boom, 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 boom. Okay? and the person attacking those camps only uses one wedge, and then they attack 6 camps, right? And then they change it over, right? They use 6 phalanxes, right? Like they say they're using cav, then they use the cav phalanx. They attack 6 different times. And like I said, guys, all you gotta do is record the results. Let me think here. I feel like I'm missing something, but I don't really think that I am. But yeah, on that note, though, guys, if you want to test what is better, attack or defense, right? You can come right over here. The person defending can pop an attack buff or an army defense buff, or you both can pop an attack buff or both pop a defense buff, or whatever the case may be. And you guys can get your results at that point, right? I know that I've done this test on many, many, many occasions, and yeah, that's how we figured out that attack is significantly better. The number losses and the number gains, or my bad, the numbers you killed and the numbers that wounded you were significantly less in terms of popping an attack buff while defending, right? And then popping an attack buff when attacking. The losses / wounds, or whatever the case may be, were less in that category. And the same thing, and I killed more troops, whether I'm defending or attacking. You end up doing more damage to them and all that good stuff. But on that note, though, guys, hopefully this is a good explanation. If it's not, let me know what I could have done differently, because in my opinion, this is not really hard. It's really, really, really hard to fuck this up. It really, truly is, guys. Super simple. I'll explain it one more time to you guys. The defender, let's say they have 5 heroes. Doesn't matter what 5 they're using, 5 heroes. And they stick to those 5 heroes no matter what. Those heroes will never change when setting camps out. Then they figure, okay, am I going to send out 1,000 infantry, 1,000 cavalry, yada, yada, yada? Bro, it does not matter what your formula is. The thing that matters is not changing that whatsoever. Now, for my kingdom, we are really, really seriously heavy range. We're like 70% ranged in a march. And then they add some cavalry and some infantry, right? So, you know, maybe the defender will put in like 60% range, 20% infantry, and 20% cavalry, right? Maybe that's what they do. And you're like, well, what about a march out of 100K? Bro, do the math. Okay, do the math, right? 60% range, that's 60,000 range troops, okay? Inside that one camp. 20% infantry, well, 20,000 infantry, right? So on and so forth. You guys figure your own numbers out, okay? And then, like I said, the defender, after the first camp's hit of an infantry phalanx, they get their troops back, they send another camp out there, they used a range phalanx. They get hit again, and then they get their troops back. And then guess what? They send a cavalry phalanx. Rinse, repeat. Now they send out an infantry wedge, then they send out an ranged wedge, then they send out a cavalry wedge. The person attacking that camp for the first 6 times will only use one march of the same exact type with their leader inside that march. And hopefully it's not too complicated. Well, what if I don't have wedges unlocked? Then don't fucking use them! There's no reason to overcomplicate things, okay? If you don't have wedges unlocked, don't use them. It's way too easy, right? But the person attacking you, if they're trying to figure out what's going to be the best march for them, right? Like I said, go off of your stats. Me, I prefer sending all 3 types out because it makes it harder for you to wipe out all my troops. I'm much more of an absolute player when it comes down to marches than trying to min-max my troops out, right? That's just me when it comes down to my troop marches, right? I just happen to be heavier in ranged and cav. Maybe I'll send 60% ranged, 40% cav when I attack that player. But the number one thing that's not going to change is the troop composition and the hero composition, right? Make sure those have to stay the same no matter what. I cannot drill it into you guys enough. The troops and the heroes will never change. The only thing that changes is the defending player changing from an infantry phalanx to a range phalanx to a cav phalanx. And if you have wedges, then you use an infantry wedge, a ranged wedge, and then a cavalry wedge. The person attacking will send out their one march the same exact way all those times, and then they'll switch to a wedge. Okay, and guess what? The player defending doesn't change. They just go right, they rinse, repeat. They go back to an infantry phalanx, then go to a ranged wedge, ranged phalanx, and then a cavalry phalanx, so on and so forth, okay? It should only take a total of 12 attacks to figure out how good your cavalry wedge or your cavalry phalanx is compared to one another, okay? It'll only take 12 marches, and at 2,500 troops per march, bro, that's very insignificant troop losses to figure out which one's going to be the best one for you. And maybe you want to test it often, right? Maybe you want to test your infantry phalanx to everything. Well, bro, that's 6 attacks per formation you want to test, okay? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a total of, if you want to test all of them, to make it easy for you guys, that's 36 attacks / defenses to test every single one of those guys. So all I'm saying here, guys, is don't overcomplicate things. Just don't do it. Don't change anything when you're doing stuff. Don't change the troop composition. Don't change the hero composition when you're attacking or defending, okay? The only thing that changes is the formations. That's it. On that note, though, guys, John know what I'm talking about, though. Love, peace, and chicken grease. Be safe. Thanks for stopping by. And don't fucking overcomplicate things! There's no reason to, all right? There really isn't. And if you have any questions, just ask me in the comments. And stay classy.